A new contract for Aaron Nesmith, or rather an extended version of his current deal. 3 years, $33 million. What went into that? Is it the right choice? What it means for the Pacers short and long term, plus no other extensions and some regular season thoughts with Rhett Bauer on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back to the NBA regular season. Games are back tonight, and welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're talking about the big news of yesterday. Aaron Nesmith, contract extension with the Pacers. 3 years, 33 million bones, bringing his contract to 4 years in total length, plus no extensions for McConnell, Toppin, and Tice. Is that all the right decision? What does this all mean for the Pacers this year and next year with their cap situation? Why did they do this? What was the deadline? We'll cover all that today, plus some thoughts on the Pacers' upcoming regular season, which starts on Wednesday night. We got a lot to get to. Let's just dive right in. Aaron Nesmith, a Pacer for 3 more years. He's back, and we planned this perfectly. We were deciding, should we record on Sunday night or Monday night? And I said, let's do Monday in case some extensions happened, and we were right on it. Rhett Bauer is here for the second time in 2 weeks. Rhett, we nailed it. We got a lot to talk about with Aaron Nesmith today, don't we?
Man, as soon as I saw that come through, my first thought was awesome for Aaron. My second thought was like awesome for me, because now I get to talk about that later. And Tony was right on the money with why we should wait and talk about it tonight. But no, I'm good. It's awesome.
He is the only guy of all their extension eligible players that made any sense to me this summer from an immediate impact and long-term impact perspective. And for a Pacers team that is trying to blend those two things, that alone is why it made sense to me. He's 24. He's kind of good now. And the long-standing thought has been, from me and a lot of people, like if you listen to a lot of these mock extension previews for rookie scale guys, it's been the MLE is sort of this barrier where players don't like to go below it, because in unrestricted free agency, they can get that from a lot of teams. But things have changed a bit. There's a new CBA. There's a lot of teams playing the over-the-cap game because a lot of teams are trying to be good. And so all of a sudden, there's like less options for these guys to move around. That's one thing that happened. The second thing is Nasir Little took a low extension last year, 4 years, 28-ish million, 27. I can't remember exactly. And everybody kind of clowned it at the time, but he wouldn't have got that this summer. And a lot of other guys in his draft class got squeezed. And so all of a sudden, those deals became more common. We saw Zeke Naji take one just a few days ago. Who was the other guy that took a sub? Peyton Pritchard, yeah, way below for him. And then Nesmith today, although his is very close to the MLE. And so the climate has changed in a way that makes deals like this make sense. And 3 years, $33 million for Aaron Nesmith on top of the $5.6 million he's owed this year in the final year of his contract makes a ton of sense to me, Red.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about this back and forth for a while. It's like, okay, the only way it really makes sense for the Pacers is if he's willing to accept a cheaper deal that is less than the MLE, and that just doesn't really make sense for Aaron Nesmith. But I think you're right in that seems to be a shift in the dynamic of the league as a whole, where like guys are just fine. Like the money is so much right now. Like it's like, oh man, that's less than $1 million. It's also $33 million. So like there's that part of it too. And I think a guy like Nesmith, he kind of talked about it in his interview after the fact, which was a little cool video from the Pacers, like getting traded to the Pacers and being immediately given an opportunity after not getting anything in Boston. I think that's kind of cool to be able to extend him for that number. And it's going to be really exciting to see if, pushing him down the pecking order of defensive assignments and then seeing how he scales up as the team gets better allows him more space to do good things, because Aaron Nesmith just does good things when he's out there.
He is a really interesting test case for thinking about these kind of contracts to me, because on one hand, he played well last year, right? People talk about these a lot. And Zach Lowe articulated this very well on his podcast yesterday. People talk about the rookie skill extensions because these guys are young and presumably getting better, that you're paying for future production. But you need like some track record. Like you need something. And he played well last year. And so in your head, if you're the Pacers, like, well, if he gets better from that, what's he worth? And if you're Aaron Nesmith, you probably think the same thing. Well, if I get better like I did last year, I'm going to have opportunity again. Like, well, maybe I'll be worth more than this. But then at the same time, his role's going to be smaller this year, right? Bruce Brown's in the mix now. Mathurin is now starting. They have all these ball handlers in the mix. They have more fours, and that's where he played a lot of minutes last year, Toppin and Walker. And so all of a sudden, even if he's just as good, maybe even a little better, the Pacers roster changed in a way that his role is going to be smaller, or even with the second unit in a way that's different. And his production could just naturally have lower like statistical output, even if he's just as impactful. Right. And so even if he's better, betting on himself could not have led to better than this. And so he was kind of in a tricky spot where like, yeah, I was good and I'm probably going to be better this year. Like we saw it in the preseason. He was awesome in some of these games. He had 2 stat lines that were like unheard of for him in regular seasons past. But at the same time, it's like, you never know what's going to be there for you. You fit well here. It's good money given your past production. It's like there were a lot of tugging things here, but it made sense for the Pacers. And if Nesmith was really invested with this franchise and knows he's going to be able to play here, it makes a lot of sense for him too, even though it is unusual given the past of these rookie skill extensions.
Yeah, and if you look at the players that the Pacers are like actively invested in, right, there's nobody that does what Aaron Nesmith does. There's
not even close.
Exactly. Like, and that's I was talking with somebody on Twitter. It's like the Venn diagram of players who can credibly defend 2 through 4 and also shoot decently is just a picture of Aaron Nesmith and nobody else. And that doesn't even get into like a guy like Bruce Brown, who you could like squint and see fit in that mold. He is not right.
Yeah.
But he's also not like part of the Pacers' long-term future at the moment, not on his current deal. So like, you've got a bunch of different guys who have a bunch of different skill sets, but Aaron Nesmith is unique among them. And being able to get a guy with his skill set, the Tony East, if you can shoot or play defense, you'll have a rotation spot in the NBA. He can do both. And so I just think that's absolutely fantastic work for the Pacers to, come to a good, it's a good spot. Like it's a good amount of money, but it's also a good amount of money for the Pacers to look like, okay, if you just plateau right now, you're probably still kind of worth that. Obviously less because you would have wanted, like the opportunity cost is there, but you have a much higher upside as a player who has 1 year in an NBA rotation. And I'm very excited to see what he can be with this team.
Yeah, his shot's been inconsistent in his career, right? So like if he goes back to like 32, 31% from 3 this year, next summer, if he was an unrestricted free agent, he would not get $33 million over 3 years. But he's a good enough defender that he'd get something. He'd get 3 for 20 or something like that. So I'm trying to think of a player who got that this year, the tax like Javon Carter money, for example, right? So that like it's a little more than that on the bet that he'll get better at other stuff like his reads and his ball handling, and we've already seen some flashes of that, or his shot just maintains. You're like, yeah, great, you're a 3-and-D wing as a backup. They paid him like a backup. It makes a lot of sense to me, and it's way under what like Denny Avdia got on the same day. What was the other wing extension he got slightly under then that I'm now struggling to remember for some reason?
I know he got less than Cole Anthony.
Cole Anthony got more than him, but that's not even. There were so many. Why can't I remember? There.
Jaden McDaniels, he got like.
Okay, he got a lot less.
He gets like 20% of that.
Who am I forgetting? There was someone else that I got a message about it right away. This is great podcasting. Anyway, It makes a lot of sense to me. Now the Pacers next year, right? We'll talk about their cap situation next year because they did not do any other extensions. We'll talk about that in a second. So Obi Top. Well, sorry. It's 11:38 p.m. There's still time. There's still time for TJ McConnell and Daniel Tice to get extended. They're not going to. They did not do any other extensions. The Obi Toppin deadline has passed, and the veteran ones are coming. So as it stands, as we're talking, they have 8 guaranteed contracts next season. Miles Turner at just shy of $20 million. Ben Mathurin at $7.3 million. Jarace Walker at $6.3. Halliburton at TBD, depending on his level of success this season and the salary cap. Nesmith at 11. It's flat $11 million for the next 3 years. Isaiah Jackson at 4.4, Ben Shepherd at 2.6, and Andrew Nembhard at 2, for a total of $98 million guaranteed dollars, plus the $5 million guarantee of TJ McConnell gets you to $103 million. That is without Bruce Brown's team option. That is without Jalen Smith's player option. That is without whatever draft picks they have. All that to say, they are low on being a cap space team now, but high on having a core of young stuff. And so they're just hoping, it looks like, that either they can make a trade in the next calendar year or that some guys take a step forward this year and they're happy with their team.
Right. Optionality, right? Josh Green, that's who you were thinking of.
It is Josh Green who I was thinking of. You are correct. He's not as good as Josh Green, but Josh Green got $8 more million.
Yeah, I would take either of those, and so I'm fine with it. But yes, it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do with this, because like the opportunity cost for the team as well is, hey, now we have less flexibility moving forward, even though you have a good young player under contract who could easily be more valuable than that number. But now that is one more or less piece on the board for the team, depending on how you want to look at it. And so now I don't know, it's going to be really, really neat to see how they come together. But it's also, I think, at this point, looking at the landscape of the league and the cap space situation, is like, yes, Pascal Siakam at the moment is the best free agent next summer, but also feels like at this point, if a team wants to get cap space for a specific reason, that they can usually do it. And if Pascal Siakam is going to make it all the way to unrestricted free agency, it's probably with another team that might have traded for him. But I broke so many rules there talking about players that are not on the Pacers. So that's my one rename. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So the swing, the Nesmith's extension isn't the only thing that makes this the case. It's also that they picked up the team option for Mathurin and Jackson, which is $11 other million. So their deadline for Bruce Brown's team option next year, assuming he's still on the team, is June 29th. So the 2 days before free agency. That is now extremely telling of what they think they can get in free agency, right? Because if they decline it, they could have like 40 plus million in space, or about, depending on how much the cap goes up. And you're like, hey, they can get anything with that. But Bruce Brown's good. And if he plays well, he's worth 23 million. So if they don't think they can get something better than Bruce Brown, they just keep him and use their space on something else. And if they decline that option, there should be a million alarm bells going off that the Pacers might be about to get a pretty good free agent. It's way too early for that to be the case now. They can make a million trades. But as it's set up right now, that is a very funny reality.
We already have the draft typed up for the team option decline. It's like, is Gordon Hayward coming to the Pacers? No.
if they decline Bruce Brown's team option after he has a decent season, there'll be 1,000 OG Anunoby photoshops on June 29th. That's what's coming.
As if there aren't already.
That's right. Hey, everybody. Snap into this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is rolling. My Vikings are winning, pulling off upsets, and right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, and that's if you win or lose that $5 bet. You'll get the $200 in bonus bets. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than with a deal like that. They have an app, and it's super easy to use. And on it, there's a wide range of betting options, including player props, over-under, spreads, whatever your favorite is, and more. It's on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, holy cow. Okay, the Mavs extended Josh Green. The Magic extended Cole Anthony. Oh, my gosh, I'm forgetting a million of them already. There were like a trillion of them. We already brought up 2 of them that happened. There were way more than I expected to happen, actually, on this final. Denny Avdia with the Wizards. We already brought up that one. There were a million rookie extensions that happened from the 2020 draft class. And, of course, Giannis. What? That's crazy. That's a Central Division disaster for the Cavs and the Pacers. You can hear more on that on Locked On Bucks, who have new hosts now, by the way. Go check that out for the latest on the MVP being tied to Dame for the next 3 years. Here in Pacerland, 3 extensions also didn't happen. 18 minutes away. TJ McConnell and Daniel Tice are extension eligible. That makes no sense for the Pacers. Do you have any thoughts on that, or can we move on?
If TJ McConnell stays in the rotation firmly, he might be a part of the Pacers' future plans. And so then, no, there's absolutely no discussion needed here.
Yeah, but he's under contract next year too, so they can extend him next year.
No.
There's no reason for that to happen.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, even if he plays this year, great. They could just keep him. Tice does not seem like somebody in their short or long-term plans. They could, in theory, decline his team option. He becomes extension eligible during the season. That's not going to happen. I have no thoughts on that. It doesn't make any sense for the Pacers. It barely makes sense for those players. Well, maybe McConnell because he's playing. But Tice getting somewhere where he could play. It's probably what he would like. But Obi Toppin is interesting. Obi Toppin was rookie scale extension eligible as of 6 p.m. on Monday. That deadline has passed, and Woj tweeted it out. He straight up confirmed, like, yeah, it's not happening. My sense the whole time was that it wasn't going to happen, not because they don't think Toppin is a player worth investing in. They traded stuff for him, right? But because he hasn't played in a regular season game for them yet, they have no idea what he is at that position. And they also have Jarace Walker right there under him, potentially waiting for minutes. They also now have extended a different player who played the 4 for them last year, Aaron Nesmith. And so, because you have restricted free agency as a backdrop, it's like a little risky, I guess, if you were going to get a bargain, but they can keep him either way. And so I don't think there was any risk of the Pacers jumping ahead of this. And if you're Obi Toppin, he's the perfect guy for the future production argument, because he probably thinks, well, I haven't done that much with the Knicks, but I could do awesome stuff here and be worth way more. So I'm not taking anything that a lot of people would consider reasonable. So not only did it not make sense for the Pacers to me, because he hadn't played a regular season game for them yet, even though he closed the preseason pretty strong, didn't make sense for Toppin because he probably thinks he could have a great season if things go his way. So I am not surprised, and I have a lot of trouble figuring out what that middle ground could even look like. Not at the fault of any of them. It's just their goals don't align, and that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. Especially when you have what should ideally be the power forward of the future in Jarace Walker.
Yeah.
Like, you definitely don't want to go ahead, like, because Obi Toppin is a power forward. He is not a small forward power forward. He is very clearly a power forward that should not be playing 3 routinely, at least. So if you were to extend him right now, you have not seen him play a regular season game and are directly putting him in the path of Jarace Walker, which makes no sense in either case, because you don't know what Jarace Walker is, but you also don't know what Obi Toppin is. So I'm not surprised to see that not get done.
Notably, Rhett, Aaron Nesmith and Jarace Walker's contracts line up exactly in years. Surely that's a coincidence. Okay, but also Nesmith getting back out there at 27 and being extension eligible during this contract, also potentially motivators for the length of years, but also because the cap's going up 10% a year, guys might want shorter deals. There's a lot of competing factors, and I just went back to Aaron Nesmith. Yeah, I think that, like if I'm the Pacers, I'm not offering Toppin more than I just offered Nesmith, right, given what he's done before. And if I'm Toppin, I'm like, I'm not taking that. Like, I could have an awesome year.
You're starting power forward.
Yeah, right. And so he could have an awesome year. And then if you're the Pacers, great. We have restricted free agency. We can just keep you. We don't have to worry about that. And if you're Toppin, you just get paid either way. So there was no risk. But there was like the middle ground between where they probably were. This is just a guess. Was probably pretty far apart, and for good reason. So I did not expect anything. People kept asking about it, and I think that makes sense. Again, he is restricted next year. His cap hold's pretty high because he was drafted pretty high. So that would be an important factor to consider when talking about that cap space stuff we mentioned earlier. But again, they could do the dance with Bruce Brown or some other guys to clear up enough space to keep him if they wanted, and to go big game hunting, though it is tricky. That's a big cap hold.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Obi Toppin, like, if the cap hold is an issue, then I'm pretty sure they can handle that. Like, I'm pretty sure they can figure that out.
Kind of.
It is a big number, but I don't think that is much of a consideration at the moment. Got to see how he plays. Got to see how he fits, and hopefully he can play some better defense than what we saw in the preseason.
It could be the classic no tampering of figure out the deal before free agency starts. Don't even give him a qualifying offer, then use his bird rights to give him what you would have given him in restricted free agency, which is wink, wink, totally fine. Nothing weird going on here.
No.
That does happen. That does happen. So they're like, it just didn't make sense to me, even though they have potentially a fruitful future together. So extension day went as planned to me, and I think that the Pacers still did what they said. They blended the short-term and long-term by keeping a rotation guy on a manageable deal while still having very obvious ways to improve next year. And I hate that this is what NBA coverage is sometimes, but you have to use the line. Pre-tradable Aaron Nesmith contract and having these mid-level salaries can be pretty important in the future. So I think it's a pretty good deal for the Pacers and for Aaron Nesmith, who was very much out of the rotation his first 2 years in the league, a win-win. So we move on unless you have any other thoughts on the extensions of the day.
Nope, not so much. Good deal for Aaron Nesmith.
Good deal for certainly going to be in the rotation after a good preseason. Aaron Nesmith. Preseason thoughts. We wrapped that up yesterday. Rhett is here to look ahead at the season. Rhett, I'm going to lob you the most broad question of all time. What do you think we're not talking about enough about the Pacers with the regular season in 2 days?
Man, the balance between the vets and the young kids, because it seems like the vets are winning out right now in a way that I don't think we saw coming. Yeah. I mean, we knew it was going to be a balance, right? It was like, oh, they want to be good. They want to try to win. But like, I don't think we would have had Jarace Walker not being in the serious rotation at all. And I think that's something to watch for.
Yeah, we don't know that, but like, look, it's trending that way. It's clearly trending. Yeah, it's funny. Like the guy that I kept saying, like the face of this decision is Daniel Tice, right? If he wins the backup 5 spot, and he didn't win the backup 5 spot, but I still feel like Vets won.
Yep,
which is pretty funny. Jalen Smith was better than Tice in the preseason. I don't know about practices. Obviously, Tice was awesome for Germany. Like we can't just look at 4 games, but. You know, the young guy potentially won that battle, but McConnell was so good. Like you can't not play him. I feel like, and I guess like I've talked about rotations to death, but the McConnell one specifically just stands out as like, you can't not play him if you're the Pacers. Like he does so much for your identity. He makes life easier for everybody else, but that means someone else important isn't playing. And I don't know how they reconcile that besides just, well, someone will get hurt at some point, and that's true, and that's like a fine way to think. And the other point is like Andrew Nembhard didn't play opening night last year, but it's just strange, and I'm not surprised that the vets won because they've played in the league before. They're just better.
That is usually how that works. Not always, but usually. No, I mean, it's not to. I don't mean to keep talking about it in the same way that we have, but it's just so. Like it's already a crowded rotation. We were already having a hard time finding the right minutes for what we figured were the most likely candidates for the Pacers to invest in moving forward. But then if you throw TJ McConnell has to get like 12 minutes a game, and even that doesn't seem like enough, that has just domino effects all the way up and down the line. I do think it will be interesting to see, like, okay, yes, the rotation changes, but like, what does that do for the Pacers' projection in the East? Like the East is pretty good, but it's also like has a pretty steep drop off, I think. So does that actually change their outlook on the season? Like, can they get out of the play-in with that? Is that the goal? Is it worth it? I think that being able to watch for that in the first couple of weeks, like you said, Nembhard he was a DNP coach's decision, and then all of a sudden he was really, really good. So maybe this is a lot for nothing, but yeah, there's so much going on for the team. I'm glad we finally get to know for sure.
Rhett, do you remember who had a vital performance in the Pacers' first win of the season last year?
No.
I believe his stat line was 14 points, 15 rebounds. I will double check as I'm talking. Goga was awesome in their first win. Like they beat the Pacers. Of course he was. He was great. And Tyrese Haliburton was talking after the game about like they had this alley-oop and they were psyched and they keep telling Goga to dunk and all this stuff. And like, I get that it's important. I made it important. I talked about it every day, how important the rotation is. And it could be so fluid in the first 5 games. Like everything I said just doesn't matter. And that's fine. That's the point of evaluating. And you don't want it to go into the season. You want to have answers. You want to play your best 10 guys every single game and have no injuries. But like also things change really fast with this stuff in a way that could just make all these conversations moot. But it is the more important part maybe is knowing just straight up like how they rank the depth chart if the team is fully healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you don't want to say like, oh, well, maybe they're just not going to be fully healthy because it's an NBA season. It's very long, 82 games. But yeah, and another thing that I was thinking about today while I was listening to a couple other podcasts talking about over-unders, like, what is this team if Tyrese Haliburton gets hurt again? It's like there could be a whole lot of effort, and that goes for every team and their best player, obviously. But like specifically this team, there's a whole lot of effort to try to be good, and if he's not on the court, I'm not so sure what that looks like. So that is a bit of a bummer to think about, but it is a very real downside that I don't think is really being discussed because it seems like it's just optimism right now.
Hey, everybody, have to talk to you guys about the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be frustrating, and Gametime takes all the hassle out of it. You can get your tickets the fast and easy way from sports, music, theater, comedy near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and I should know, I used it myself. Went to New York, wanted to see the Liberty play, and I bought tickets on Gametime to see them play the Dallas Wings, and it was super easy. Got them day of the game. It was fantastic. Got to see where I was sitting, what the view would be like from the seats, and of course, with Gametime, you're getting their best price guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. They have zone deals for an average of 18% savings. Everything you want from a ticket buying experience right in one place. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. I'd like to thank everybody for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every day. Go to Locked On Bucks for your second listen. Like I said earlier, biggest news in the NBA by a mile on Monday. Giannis back with the Bucks for 3 more years. I just bent my toenail back, so I have to lean over in my chair because it hurts. Yeah, I agree with that point. I was actually going to bring that up as one of mine is this team actually more suited to cover for that problem? I have not talked about that hardly at all because Haliburton played well in his preseason outings. So something I did talk about after the Rockets game that intrigued me and makes me, I'm not pushing back because I think the Pacers will still be bad if Tyrese Haliburton doesn't play. But I don't think they'll be as bad as last year because of something they did in the Rockets game. And that is Bruce Brown, backup point guard. Because like the problem they had last year, Nembhard picked it up at the end of the season, but like the net rating with Andrew Nembhard as the lone point guard last year was awful. It was like minus 14. And some of that was tank-tastic games, and some of that was just mid-season slogginess, but like it was tough. So McConnell was fine, but like they couldn't get enough there. And that wasn't totally on Nembhard. He was playing off ball all season, but this year with Nembhard having a year under his belt and looking better already as the one, McConnell, we know what that is. They have another handler in Bruce Brown. Like, I don't think they'll just have like, oh my God, they can't score for 8 minutes level of stretches, even without Haliburton. And so I think they go from like, oh, this team stinks to like, these guys are as good as the Rockets, maybe without him. And that might be enough to cover for that problem. But I agree that so much of their identity and style is built around him that they are still very open to a one-player injury derailing their season.
Yeah. The same could probably be said for Miles Turner, which maybe not to the same degree.
Yes.
Obviously, Haliburton is the entire identity, and Miles Turner is the best defensive player on the Pacers, but we still have terrible defense, so maybe that actually doesn't matter as much.
Their defense goes from 24th to 26th without him this coming
season. The overall impact is probably not that big of a deal. But
him being out is more of like, what does that do for Obi now? Like that, then he goes back to not having the same advantages that he now has. So, and then like to some extent, this stuff is true for every team, but like I bring it up a million times. They were 26 and 22, and both of them played. Like what is that without them 9 and a blot? Like they obviously need them to play a lot, and maybe they will. They were both healthier last year than in the past, but maybe they won't. You just never know. But they are uniquely equipped to handle basically an injury to any of their other 13 players. That is the advantage of having that they have. But Haliburton and Turner obviously are tricky ones to manage.
You touched on something that I am hopefully going to be able to capture in the next couple weeks. What is Obi Toppin without Tyrese Haliburton? What is Obi Toppin not on the Knicks without Tyrese Haliburton? Because that is going to be one of the biggest data points for me and what Obi Toppin's market could be next summer. Yeah. Because if he is just a dude, that says a lot more about Tyrese Haliburton than it does Obi Toppin, and then you can move forward with that information.
That's a good question. And like, it'll be funny if this comes to this, like if he gets to free agency and his like stats and net rating with Haliburton are like insane. And then in the minutes without him, it's just like, what's he doing?
Yep.
Well, if you're another team who doesn't have Tyrese Haliburton, you're like, what do we do with this information? Yeah, that's a good question. And we didn't get a lot of sample of him without Haliburton in the preseason, but I think that's going to be what the regular season is too, which is smart, right? Like that was one of the arguments for Jase off the bench. It was like, oh, I'll have the ball more, but well, he won't have the ball a lot given the current rotation set up for different reasons. But it makes sense to pair them as much as possible. But yeah, there will obviously be times where they're not playing together. That's a good question and an under discussed one for good reason, because all the talk about Obi from the team even was like, look how good he fits with our style. But what about when that style isn't happening?
Yep, exactly. Especially when, like, even with TJ McConnell, who can like put pressure on the rim and he's like dishing out and loves to get out and run and all that stuff, it's not the same. And so if you see even like, I don't want to say the slightest drop off, but like if it's a noticeable drop off, what do you do with that? Because I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, but I strongly dislike the heliocentric type build. And that doesn't have anything to do with, like, of course, Tyrese Halliburton should have the ball all the time. But if Tyrese Halliburton is the only one who can create anything for anybody else, that is probably an issue. And I don't love stacking players around him that rely so heavily on him to do the bulk of their jobs.
The Nuggets got away with it because Jokic never misses a game, like ever.
He's also huge and can operate from every single area with the ball. So, like, that's, yeah. Also an incredible isolation scorer, which, like, it's like he should be an MVP or something.
They are the peak, like, heliocentrism team to me of what teams can go, well, look, they did it. They figured it, right? Like, everybody will point out, like, well, they just got the 4 perfect fits around Jokic and it worked. And that's true, but it's a little deeper.
Just have the best player in the world right now. It's not that hard. Why doesn't everybody do it?
It has been interesting to hear Bruce Brown be like, yeah, I'm ready to play with Halliburton because I played with Jokic. So, like, I get to always be ready and shoot. Then he also, in the same breath, is like, I've never been this open in my life.
I was going to say, like,
what?
Brother.
Yeah, you were.
We just saw it, like,
I'm not going to question you because you're the player, obviously, but that did make me laugh. I was like, I think I saw the finals where there wasn't a defender within 5 feet. Bruce Brown in general is just a guy that, like, it's funny because the story before the season and the story in the preseason are the same. So it's not like it's hard to keep talking about him because it's like Bruce Brown is versatile and can fill every role for the Pacers. And now through 4 preseason games, I'm like, yep, that's what he can do. But that is important. Like, they did not have that guy last year. And I think that what I said earlier about him potentially being like another point guard who can put pressure on the rim is probably an under-discussed part of his addition, just because they really struggled with drives last year. Like, it was basically just Halliburton and McConnell and sometimes some other guys. So I think that could actually have a pretty big boost on their non-Halliburton minutes. The question is how much is his passing needed, or what does he actually look like in those minutes? And is he the best option, or can Andrew Nembhard sneak in there?
Yep, that's exactly right. A guy who does everything, what are the gaps that are still there after you have that player? Like, because if you have players who are good at everything but not great at anything, that's still going to show through, and you're going to have to adjust accordingly. And so even if it is, the most versatile player, you're still going to have information gathering, and it's still going to change how you do things. And I hope that Andrew Nembhard can get to the point where he can be that backup point guard, which will, change a lot of things for everybody on the roster. But yeah, no, regular season basketball, let's get it.
Have you done a win projection?
I have, yeah. I have the Pacers.
That generally is followed with the number. Not just guess I did.
I know. I have the Pacers at 43 wins.
Whoa, more than me.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think some of that is baked into, like, it seems like they're going to try pretty hard. And so I think as long as Halliburton is healthy, they will be trying, and I think that's going to be enough.
I think a lot of the rotation decisions suggest that you're right and that they will be trending that way. I think they also have 2 first-round picks and a lot of cap space and some incentive to think about next season in a way that will make this season extremely interesting. As Chad Buchanan said, trying to figure out that long-term versus short-term balance. It's going to be fascinating. Their extensions tip a little bit that they're ready for pushing that balance and trying to toe the line that is so freaking hard to do. Because you know why it's hard to do? Because if it was easy to do it, every single NBA team would do it every year. So we'll see if they can pull it off. But they've got a team. They are ready to go. And tomorrow we'll talk a little more previewing the Pacers regular season and talk about the Wizards, because it's time. The games are here. I don't have to talk about exhibitions. I don't have to talk about maybes. I'll probably still talk about the rotation a little bit, but not as much because people are not happy with how much I'm talking about the rotation, and they are right to be because it is a lot. Rhett, thank you for the time. Where can people find you and your work covering the NBA and the Pacers?
You can find me on Twitter at Rhett_Bauer. I have a lot of fantasy basketball stuff coming out. So if you have any interest in that at all, I would love to talk to you about it.
You know who isn't good at fantasy basketball? Me. Me.
Yeah, it's not that hard until you like actually start doing it. And then like, if you actually start caring about it, it's like, oh, this isn't that easy. Like it's not super great.
Yeah. I did my first categories league a few years ago. I got 9th out of 10, and I'm now intimidated by fantasy basketball.
It's hard.
We will see if I ever return to that. Later this week, actually Thursday, Adam Friedman will return for his favorite yearly show, Overreacting to the Pacers' first game of the season. I have to listen back to last year's and see how dumb our overreactions were and how awesome they were. Friday, we'll talk Cavs. Saturday, we'll talk after that game. Lots coming here on Locked On Pacers. Rhett, thanks for the time. Everybody, thank you for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.